Well, good afternoon, Central Georgia. We just received the newest update from the National Hurricane Center in regards to Hurricane Humberto and Tropical Depression 9. So there's a lot of new stuff, especially with Hurricane Humberto, as it is now a Category 5 hurricane, the second Category 5 hurricane this season. So let's look at the infrared satellite and radar. Here's the look at both of the storms. So you can see Hurricane Humberto on the right, extremely organized, a powerful storm with winds of up to 160 miles per hour, a fantastic eye wall, very organized in that respect. And then you can tell in the Caribbean, you can see a batch of showers and storms. That's Tropical Depression 9, and it hasn't yet formed fully. It hasn't become a tropical storm yet, and when it becomes a tropical storm, that's when it will finally take on the name Tropical Storm Imelda, in which we've been talking about for the past couple of days. We can't really call it Imelda yet because it hasn't formed technically yet, but it will soon by tonight or by tomorrow early morning. But you can tell we can't really see a eye wall yet, but it will form and organize by the next 24 hours. So here's a look at the tracks on both storms. Here's Hurricane Humberto, just turned into a Category 5 storm, a very powerful storm with winds of up to 160 miles per hour. This is once again the second Category 5 hurricane in the Atlantic this season. The first was Hurricane Aaron, right around the same spot, and has a pressure at around 925 millibars. So the rule of thumb in terms of pressure is that the lower the pressure, the stronger the storm is. Still a slow mover going towards the west-northwest at 10 miles per hour. So even though it's a Category 5 hurricane, thankfully, we're not expecting any impacts for anyone on the coast or for anyone on the continental United States. And with the new track from the National Hurricane Center, it now has all of the storm completely missing the island of Bermuda, but they could see potentially some tropical storm force winds and some rip currents, very similar to the impacts that was given to Bermuda from Hurricane Gabrielle. So looking more in depth in Hurricane Humberto's path and projected intensity, going to continue to have Category 5 strength for the next day. And then by Sunday evening, Sunday afternoon, should be once again a Category 4 storm as it encounters a little bit more wind shear. By Tuesday, 3 in the morning, it should go back to a Category 3 storm with winds of up to 130 miles per hour. That's when it should pass the island of Bermuda towards the west of the island. Then by Wednesday afternoon, should be a Category 2 storm, eventually weakening as it gets into cooler water. Once again, you can notice the cone, the path, not even close towards the eastern coast. So we're not worried at all about Humberto, but Humberto's path can really influence the forecast for Imelda. This is something that we've been saying for the past couple of hours. So here's Tropical Depression 9. This is the one that we're keeping a close eye on. And it's still, once again, a tropical depression, has winds of up to 35 miles per hour, pressure around 1,000 millibars, so way higher than what Humberto has right now. And I called Humberto a slow mover. Well, Tropical Depression 9 is even slower at 5 miles per hour, moving towards the northwest. So it's moving at a snail's pace in terms of tropical terminology. And it's expected to become a tropical storm by later tonight or by early tomorrow morning. So once it becomes a tropical storm, once it has winds of up to 40 miles per hour, that's when we'll finally have the name Imelda. With the path, it will move slowly towards the north through portions of the Bahamas. So the Bahamas, as of right now, have already warnings in place, tropical storm warnings, in which they're expecting tropical storm force winds of up to 40 miles per hour. So I'll get to that later in the next graphic. By Monday, getting close to the Floridian coast. By Tuesday, should become a hurricane, a Category 1 hurricane with winds of up to 130 miles per hour. Now, we've been talking about the large amount of uncertainty in regards to this storm and the path and whether it will make landfall in the Carolinas, whether it will make landfall on the Georgia coast. Well, with the new forecast track, it now has the cone of uncertainty completely avoiding the coast entirely. So if we look at the forecast track, still some uncertainty, but it has the storm turning to a Category 1 hurricane by Tuesday. getting close to the Carolinas, and then stalling for a bit, and then making an eastward curve out towards the Atlantic, towards where Humberto is at. And this is what we call some of the effects of the Fujiwara effect, where Humberto gets close enough where it will influence the path of Tropical Depression 9, or what will become Tropical Storm Imelda. It will influence the path where it will pull it out of our neck of the woods. So very promising so far. I mentioned tropical storm warnings and watches. Here are the warnings. Most of the Bahamas are under a tropical storm warning, meaning that it's guaranteed that they'll see winds of up to 40 to 74 miles per hour. In terms of the watches, parts of the Floridian coast are under a tropical storm watch. So what does this mean? A watch means that it's not guaranteed that they could see winds, but it is very possible that they could have winds of up to 40 miles per hour. So north of Palm Beach all the way to Volusia County in Florida, they're under a tropical storm watch. And I expect more places to be under a tropical storm watch or warning very soon. Let's look at the models. Here's the GFS model. And in terms of the models, this is the spaghetti models. This is all the different model groups at one graphic. And you can see with the GFS, most of the models, once again, follows what the path from the National Hurricane Center has given us. And it has this, once again, being steered away from us. Still seeing 1 to 4 models having this make a landfall in South Carolina or potentially in Georgia. But once again, that's the outlier. The majority of these models have it steered away from us. The Euro is indicating a little bit more towards a potential landfall, especially in the Carolinas. So we see half of the models in terms of the Euro having it still come through the Carolinas or potentially the coastal parts of Georgia. But we also see half of the other models being steered away from our neck of the woods. So what we're seeing is that the majority of these models, combined with the Euro and the GFS, has the storm being steered away from us. So it's looking more and more likely. We're gaining a little bit more confidence. Of course, there's still some uncertainty. We would love to see all these models in agreement that it will not impact us at all. Here's a look at the future view. So as I mentioned, the storm as of right now, Tropical Depression 9, still disorganized, but by later tonight, tomorrow morning, you can see a circulation once it goes through the Bahamas. That's the eye wall forming. And then you can see it become more organized, moving through the Bahamas, moving at a snail's pace. And then you can see some of the outer bands providing some rain and wind towards the Floridian coast. Some of the outer bands even reach the Carolinas and Georgia by Monday afternoon, even though the eye is still near the Bahamas. By Tuesday, that's when it will finally get closer towards us. But the future view has this storm a little bit towards the east as compared to some other models where it had the center of the storm come more towards the west, closer to the coast. Here's the GFS long-range model. And once again, it has this storm coming close to the coast, stalling, and then being steered towards the east, towards the Atlantic. That sort of follows the path from the National Hurricane Center. And then here's the Euro. And the Euro has almost the same thing, stalling a little bit more as compared to the GFS, but still not making landfall and being steered away from us towards the east, potentially riding the eastern coast, so still providing some impacts for North Carolina and maybe the Outer Banks in terms of rain. But the one thing that I'm seeing from both of these long-range models is that I'm not seeing any of these models indicate a potential landfall, which is amazing news. But of course, if it does stall, we could have a rain event for the coast. So the Georgia coast and the Carolina coast. This is the Euro Future View rainfall. This goes until next Friday, and it's indicating high totals for the upper parts of South Carolina and the southern parts of North Carolina. So it's indicating up to 3 to 4 inches maybe locally higher for places north of Charleston and in between Wilmington. And then for Savannah and Jacksonville, could see numbers close to 2.5 to 3 inches. But then for parts of central Georgia, so we go more inland, we'll see only trace amounts, especially for the most eastern counties. Those are the spots that have the highest chance of seeing rain from Imelda, but it doesn't look like anything substantial, which is unfortunate because they missed out on substantial rain on Thursday. So I know they really want and they really need the rain. Let's look at the GFS rainfall totals, showing almost the exact thing, showing actually lower amounts because the GFS has this completely being steered away from us. So if that's the case, we'll see lower rainfall totals. This shows Savannah, Jacksonville, Charleston, Wilmington having 2.5 to 4 inches of rain. And then for central Georgia, once again, only trace amounts. So nothing really impressive at all. Let's look at the future view wind gust. And let's see, once we get into the start of the work week, we'll start to see gusty winds for Brunswick. So for the coast, Brunswick seeing winds of up to 24 miles per hour. By Monday, the winds will start to pick up for the places along the coast as the storm gets closer to the coast. Brunswick, 32 mile per hour gusts, 23 mile per hour gusts in Savannah. Charleston, 22, Myrtle Beach, 22. And the same thing goes for central Georgia as well. It could be a little breezy, showing Vidalia having winds of up to 25 miles per hour, Cordele, 20 miles per hour, Dublin, 20 miles per hour, and Macon, 22 miles per hour. So we're talking about how it looks very promising that the storm could be steered away from the coast. But once again, I still want to highlight that the uncertainty. We saw in the spaghetti model, some models indicated that it could make landfall. So let's go over all the potential scenarios while we're at it. So scenario 1 is what we were thinking yesterday, with most of the models indicating a potential landfall in the Carolinas. And the reason why is because Humberto was forecasted to stay a little bit farther than anticipated from what would become Imelda. So with Humberto being far from Imelda, Imelda would have been influenced from a low pressure system inland, so a low pressure system around our state and potentially around Tennessee, that could potentially pull the storm towards the Carolinas. So that was scenario 1, which would have looked a lot more likely yesterday. But now it looks more likely that scenario 2 is going to be the real scenario that's going to come into fruition. So and that is Humberto is then going to influence future Imelda, and it's going to pull the storm away from the U.S. coast, and potentially these two storms could merge together. And then scenario 3, highly unlikely, but this is what I call the chaos scenario, and this is where the Fujiwara effect will come into place. The Fujiwara effect is a very rare phenomenon where you have two storms of equal strength close to each other, and they provide each other some chaotic movement. So it's two systems rotating one another, and this would pull Humberto closer to the coast, which would be a bad scenario because, as we know, Humberto is a very strong storm. It's a Category 5 storm, and we would have potentially catastrophic impacts for the coast. So that looks highly unlikely. So let's see how each scenario plays out. Here's scenario 1, which looked likely yesterday, not anymore today, thankfully, where Humberto does not have much influence on Imelda, so Imelda just goes northward into the Carolinas. Here's scenario 2, which looks more likely right now, and it has Humberto pulling the storm away from us, and it steers it towards the Atlantic, and they could potentially merge together. That looks like the more likely scenario. And then we have the chaos scenario, the Fujiwara effect. Notice they're just spinning around each other like they're doing a tango dance, and it has Humberto pulled closer to the Carolinas. That's potentially the worst case scenario, because instead of a tropical storm or a low-end hurricane, you have a strong major hurricane coming to the Carolinas, which I think no one would want. In terms of the hurricane frequency, yes, we're at the end of September. We are past our peak of the season was around September 10th, but notice 60% of all activity happens after the peak of the season, and also we're around a year since Helene came through central Georgia. So tropical systems could very well become very active around the end of September and early October. Early October is when Hurricane Milton also formed in the Gulf, didn't provide some impacts. It went through Florida. But I'd say by the end of October, once we get into October 20th, that's when we become a lot more calm and relaxed in terms of the tropics. You could have a superstorm, and when I mean a superstorm, you could have a rare storm that defies all odds, like Hurricane Sandy, and that could provide some impacts towards anyone along the coast or along the Gulf. But thankfully, if you look at all the amount of hurricanes that happen throughout September and October, around late October, that's when the tropics become way more inactive. So looking at the names, so we're about to have Imelda very soon, either by tonight or by tomorrow. After Imelda would be Jerry, and then it would be Karen, which a lot of people would laugh at the fact that we would have a potential tropical system called Karen. And I've seen comments saying that Karen could be the worst storm of the century just because of its name. So obviously there's no science that backs it up, but a little bit of an amusing fact that we could have a tropical system named Karen very soon. So here are the headlines. Here's everything that I want you to know, especially for central Georgia. If you're watching in central Georgia, this is for you. So it's trending towards no real impacts here in central Georgia. We could have breezy weather. We showed the future view wind graphic, and it showed potentially gusts of up to 20 miles per hour, but that's it. And actually, this system could filter in cooler air on the backside of the system and also could provide some drier air as well. So the weather could actually be quite nice because of Tropical Depression 9, or what eventually would become Tropical Storm Imelda. So that's the in-depth view of the newest update around 5 o'clock. But here's the summary. Here's what I will call the conclusion, or the broad view of everything that you need to know, especially with the new 5 o'clock update. So we have two storms right now in the Atlantic. We have Tropical Depression 9, and we also have Hurricane Humberto. Hurricane Humberto is towards the right in the screen, and it's very organized. It's a powerful storm. It has Category 5 strength, or second Category 5 storm so far this year. It will continue to make a northward curve, eventually weaken back into a Category 4 by Monday. As it passes Bermuda, it will be a Category 3 storm. Not expecting any direct impacts for Bermuda, but could see some gusty winds and rip currents. And then as it goes into cooler water, it will weaken. So other than Bermuda, we're not expecting any impacts for the coast, but it could influence the forecast for Tropical Depression 9, or what eventually will become Imelda. So Tropical Depression 9 has winds of up to 35 miles per hour, still moving at a snail's pace, moving towards the northwest at 5 miles per hour. Eventually it will become a tropical storm by either tonight or by tomorrow early morning, and it will go through the Bahamas through the next couple of days. Once we get into Tuesday, it should be a Category 1 hurricane as it comes close to the Georgia and the South Carolina coast. But with the new forecast track, we're indicating that the storm will be steered away from the coast and will miss the coast entirely. So this is the South Carolina coast and the Georgia coast, and we could potentially avoid a landfall, which would be a great scenario to have. Here's a look at the spaghetti models from the GFS. The GFS is indicating towards the scenario where it will completely miss the South Carolina and the Georgia coast. Still have a couple of outliers where it indicates potential landfall, but once again, it's an outlier. But the Euro has a little bit more models that indicate a potential landfall, but half of the Euro models also indicate towards the more likely scenario where it will completely miss the Georgia and the South Carolina coast. But there's still some uncertainty in the forecast because there's a lot of moving parts in the atmosphere that could really influence the path of Tropical Depression 9. But for central Georgia, here's what you need to know. We're trending towards no real impacts, and we could have some breezy conditions. We could have winds of up to 20 miles per hour by next week. But other than that, it could filter in cooler and drier air here in central Georgia. So it could actually be, it could also cause some nice weather for most of next week as well. So that's your Tropics update as of 5 o'clock. I'll be back at around 8 o'clock with the newest update. And the 8 o'clock update, that could definitely be the one where we could finally have a named storm Imelda in the picture. So if that happens, of course, I'll be here with the newest update and the newest analysis on the forecast track. Have a beautiful night, Central Georgia.